Hey everybody, Paul from Avalon here. Today I'm going to take you through step-by-step how to use our free bookkeeping template in Google Sheets or Excel. You'll learn everything that you need to know about doing your bookkeeping for your small business, so let's dive in. So here we are, we're at the bookkeeping template. Just click the link and it'll take you to Avalon's free bookkeeping template in Google Sheets. And we'll want to actually either make a copy of this sheet or download it to Excel. If we tried to go ahead and edit this for our own purposes, it's locked in a view only state. So that's just to keep people from making changes to the actual template version. Once we download it or make a copy, we can do whatever we want with it. So here's the example. I'm typing into the cell and nothing's showing up. If I go ahead and click File, Make a Copy, I can rename this to whatever I want. So I'm just going to call it My Bookkeeping Template, and I'm going to save it to my drive. This is good if you have a Gmail account or a G Suite account. You can have your own copy of it in Google Sheets, and you can edit it really from anywhere. You don't need a desktop version of the program or anything like that. So now this is the copied My Bookkeeping Template, and I can type into the cells. So I can actually edit this one, whereas the original template, the one I'm looking at here, was view only, and I can't do anything to it. So that's how we copy it as a Google Sheet. If you wanted to use this as an Excel file, which is totally fine too, you can click File and click Download, or just mouse over Download, and it'll bring you to the list of things you can download it as. I'd recommend Microsoft Excel.xlsx, and it will prompt you to download it to your desktop, and you can save it as an Excel file and open it up in Excel just the same way as you might use it as a Google Sheet. Our first step is we're going to check out this bookkeeping tab, and we're going to go through what these instructions say. So copy the sheet, just like I mentioned. You're going to want to enter information into these blue cells. You can enter info into the other ones, but it doesn't really help anything. So we want to use those shaded blue cells for your information. So that's this section here. That's going to be step one. So I'm going to type in my name. I'm going to type in the year. And then it's going to ask us if we charge GST, HST. If you're registered for GST or HST, very, very similar, just different sales taxes in different provinces in Canada. You can choose either yes or no, and it's going to give you some instructions on what to do down below. So if we are registered for GST, HST, we're going to want to enter both the gross amount and the GST, HST amount. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into recording transactions. Here's what it looks like if we chose no. It says enter the gross amount only. So then we would only enter amounts in this column and not this column. So we'll leave it as yes for the demonstration purposes. The second question here is, did you work from a home office during the year? And if you did, and if you use that predominantly for your business, we can claim home office expenses. So we can see that there's a home office tab, and we've said yes. And now it says, please fill out the home office tab. It's that purple one down below. If you choose no, it's going to just say, please skip the home office tab. So we'll leave it as yes for this demonstration too. So that's your information. You can see we've entered Paul 2022 down there. It now shows up in this cell. It'll show up in the other ones as well. And then these are really just to help you understand what to do when it comes to entering transactions if you have GST, HST, and whether or not you worked from your home office during the year, whether you're going to use that home office tab. So next up, we can actually just start recording transactions, and that's all down here in the bookkeeping section. We have columns for transaction description. We have a column for the date. We have gross amount. So that's going to be the total transaction, including any GST, HST, or provincial sales tax that you paid on the transaction. We have the GST, HST column, and that's going to be any GST, HST that you paid on transactions. Again, this column's only if you are registered for GST. So you put any GST, HST that you paid in this column, or any that you've collected on revenue. So we're going to record expenses and asset purchases, as well as any revenue transactions in these cells here. So we've got a whole bunch, lots that we can use, because we're going to be doing a full year of bookkeeping in this bookkeeping sheet. The net amount here, it's grayed out. It's a calculated cell. So if we paid $105 for something, and we also paid GST, HST of $5, then our formula just calculates out what the actual expense portion would be. And then we also break out the GST, HST paid. The last column here in column F is transaction type, and we're going to just use this drop-down menu to choose what type of transaction that we had here. So if it was sales, revenue, we could choose that account. If it was some sort of other expense like rent, we would choose that type of expense. And we can add a description here. So we can say rent for the month or whatever it is. And then we're going to add a date as well. So let's say it was rent for the month of August. I'm going to enter the date in this format just because I like it. And now we have August. We paid rent of 105, including $5 of GST, and it's being recorded as a rent expense. So that's generally how this sheet works. There's a way faster way that we can use this to record all of our transactions, and I'll show you that next. So the way that we get transactions into the bookkeeping sheet in a more efficient manner is to download our transactions from either our online banking or our online credit card account. So in this example here, I've downloaded a pretend set of transactions for the month of August from my online credit card login. So I've got some expenses, and you can see they're shown as negative numbers. That may or may not be the case for your transactions that you download, but I do want to show this to explain a concept for the bookkeeping sheet. And then we also have this positive one for a credit card payment. So we can get these numbers into our bookkeeping sheet in a much faster way by copying and pasting these directly in there before we record what types of transactions they are. So as I mentioned, we do need to have these all as positive amounts. And to do that, I can use a formula that's just like this. I can say equals this times -1. That's one way to do it. And I can drag that all the way down, and that's going to get a new column with positive numbers. This one's a negative number because I've just reversed the sign here. I'm actually not going to be recording credit card payments, meaning this was money that came from my bank account and is now recorded on my credit card. I don't need that in here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that row. And the rest of these I'm going to copy and then paste into the bookkeeping sheet. And so I might want to do it so that it's in the same order as the sheet. So I'm going to cut this column. I'm going to insert it into here. And then now I can copy and paste. Actually, I'm going to need to hide these as well. And then I can copy and paste all of these directly into that bookkeeping sheet. So I've copied it, and now I'll head over to the sheet and paste them in. So here we are back at the sheet where we want to enter our transactions. And I've got that one transaction in here that I'm going to delete it because we don't actually need it. That was just for demonstration purposes. And what we want to do is paste those transactions in, but we want to right click and use paste special and choose values only. So as soon as I do that, we can see I've just copied and now pasted all of those transactions in here. And so I'll show you why I like values only. If I go ahead and just paste those as normal, it's going to replace all the blue. And sometimes it might mess up some of the formulas if we do it wrong, or it might change how the date is formatted in here. And we just want to keep it in one format. So what we do is we right click and we go paste values only. So we're most of the way there now for doing our bookkeeping for the month of August. You can see it's hyperlinked this, so I'm going to get rid of that. And we have descriptions, we have dates, we have gross amounts, we have net amount. That's a calculated cell. And all we have to do is enter in the GST that we paid on these transactions. So to do that, typically you're going to have to either have a receipt or you could use a formula to calculate it. But for this example, I'm just going to say that each of these had GST on them. Really, it's important to keep track of that properly. So I'll pause this and record all that GST. So there we go. I've added in the GST, HST that we paid on each of these transactions. And it might not be accurate for this demonstration purpose, but really you're going to want to hang on to receipts anyway. And there's a great program called Dext that you can use to upload receipts, and it'll keep track of those, or you can just take photos of them and keep them in your photo album, and they'll be organized by date, which helps you a lot. You can really just grab the photo and enter in the amounts from that. If you don't collect GST, HST, again, we're going to choose no here, and it's going to say enter the gross amounts only. So we would only enter those gross amounts and leave this column blank. Our example is yes, so we're going to go with that. So now we have gross amount, GST, HST paid, and net amount. And next, all we really do is record the transaction type, and it's a drop-down menu. These are general transaction types, and it really doesn't matter too much which you choose. I would say choose the transaction type that makes the most sense to you. So the Drake Eatery is my favorite pub in town here. So we're going to go with meals and entertainment expense for that one. Best Buy, we're going to say that this was actually an asset purchase. We'll say that it was a monitor that I purchased for my business. And I'm going to scroll all the way down and choose computer equipment under capital asset. If you're not sure what the difference is between an expense and a capital asset, I've linked a blog article that we wrote about it in the description below. Generally, the difference is that capital assets are going to last longer than a year, whereas expenses are typically used up before that year is over or instantly, in the case of having a drink at the drink. So capital asset, computer equipment for this one. And I'll go ahead and just record all of these transactions. You can skip ahead if you like. I'm going to talk us through categorizing all of these transactions. And it's really a matter of preference. What makes the most sense to you when you're looking at your income statement? How do you want these numbers to appear on here? Whether something is office expenses or software and subscriptions really is up to you and your preference. So we'll go through these. We'll say Robin's parking. This one could be vehicle or travel. I like it as travel. I'm going to say vehicle is more like fuel and that kind of thing. Zapier is a software subscription. Faxage is an electronic fax. So we'll call that software subscription. It could also be telephone and utilities if you want, but either one works fine. Amazon, this was a book for business reading. It's an office expense. Google, we've got that as software subscriptions. That's our G Suite account. HubDoc, that is another software subscription. Lots of those going on. Same with Practice Ignition. Microsoft, I don't know why I'm using that too. I guess I do use that. Calendly, lots of software subscriptions. More parking, so that's travel again. We'll do that. Burger Crush, great restaurant in Victoria. We're going to call that meals and entertainment. Momentum Dashboard, another software subscription. Purchase interest, that was I didn't pay my credit card in time, so we're going to call that bank charges and interest. Bao is another excellent restaurant. I guess I'm going out for lots of business meetings, apparently. Amazon, another office expense, we'll call that Carbon. That's an excellent software that we use for our internal task management. London Drugs, we're going to call that office expenses again. And Air Canada, that's going to be travel. So the idea really is to choose the one that makes the most sense to you here. And at the very end of this video, I'll show you how to customize these so that you can rename transaction types so that you can have custom ones on your income statement. So we have all of our transactions, our expense and asset purchase transactions recorded for the month. Next, we're going to record our revenue. And so there are a couple of ways we can do this. We can go into our online banking and do the same thing where we export the transactions to CSV and then copy and paste them in here. And we're going to probably have something that looks like this: deposit or sales deposit. And we're going to have a date on that. And what we would do is we would just record the gross amount here, copy and paste it again. Makes a lot more sense. And we can record it that way. Or one thing that can help if you're doing your bookkeeping all at once for a whole year, probably one of the more efficient ways to do it actually is that way, as long as you don't want monthly financial statements, but to record all your transactions for 1 year, just take a look at your invoicing system and grab a summary of the revenue for the whole year. And you can type it in here. You could say summary of revenue for entire year. And we'll say it was for the year 2022. And let's say we earned $84,000 in gross revenue and we collected $4,000 in GST. And this was all based on that report from our invoicing system. All we then do is we just use the sales account here to record that as revenue. This is the only revenue account. The rest are either expenses or asset purchases. So now that we have this, let's pretend that we've recorded all of our expenses for the entire year. Now that we have all of our transactions recorded, we can check out our income statement with our total sales amount, no cost of sales. If I had maybe a t-shirt business or something where there really were cost of sales, I would choose that as a category and record a cost of sales amount. We just had operating expenses. You saw me record our credit card interest, some meals and entertainment, lots of software subscriptions, and some travel. And that leads us to $1,136.94 in operating expenses with a net income of $78,000. So we've recorded all of our transactions. The next step is to go in and fill out the Home Office tab. So here on the Home Office tab, we also have some instructions. It says, if we've used a portion of our home for our office, fill in the blue shaded cells. So just like the bookkeeping template, we're going to use these blue cells to record our home office expenses. So we want to record, first of all, the information about our home office. How large is your home in square feet? Let's say we live in an 800 square foot condo. And then the second question is approximately how large is your home office area in square feet? So you can estimate this, or maybe when you bought your home, you had a plan that showed the square footage of each room. So let's say my home office is 150 square feet out of my 800 square foot condo. We can now see that the estimated percentage of my home used as an office is 18.75%. And what that's going to do is it's going to take our total yearly home expenses, multiply it by 18.75%, and get us our eligible home office expenses. So next step is to actually go in and record our annual home office expenses. And that includes things like heat, electricity, insurance, maintenance, all these things you can enter in here. These are total annual amounts. So what we can do is we can add up our bills or get a summary of our bills from our utilities providers, and we can record those here. So for example, if I have paid $60 in heat a month, I would have $720 of heat expenses. Let's say I paid $100 electricity a month. I'd have $1,200 in electricity. My home insurance was $450. Maintenance, I didn't really have any. My condo's pretty new, so I didn't have much in terms of maintenance costs. Mortgage, this would be if you own your home, you can include your mortgage interest, and that's not your total mortgage payments. That's just the interest portion of your mortgage. So you'll usually get an annual statement that shows you exactly how much you paid in interest for the year. And that's a great place to look for this amount. So let's say I paid $8,000 in interest on my mortgage this year. I also paid property taxes. So I paid $2,600 in property taxes. And in this case, I didn't rent a house. I owned it. So I have nothing in the rent row there. Strata fees. Yes, I did have strata. It was, let's say it was $350 a month. And then if there was anything else that you had, this could be internet, any other kinds of expenses that directly relate to your home office, you could record those here. So let's say I had interest expenses of $80 a month. I can record that. And then I'll just add a quick internet cost description in that blue cell there. So that'll just help you remember what this is. If you go ahead and use this sheet next year, you can pretty much reuse it, just copy it and then edit the numbers, and it makes recording your bookkeeping really quick. So you can see 18,000 in total home expenses for the year, multiplied by 18.75 is our percentage of home used as an office, equals about $3,400 in home office expenses, eligible to be deducted. So come back over to our income statement. All those numbers are still the same, but now we have a home office expense number and a net income number. Something else to note on this income statement is really something that shouldn't be on an income statement. It's your capital assets that you purchased. So when we came back over to this bookkeeping tab, we said this was a monitor and it was a capital asset purchase. Check out the description if you're not sure the difference between capital assets and expenses. But we've recorded it and it doesn't show up in our income statement as an expense. It shows up in this list so that we can record it on our tax return as a capital asset purchase. That's going to be actually deducted as a thing called capital cost allowance on your tax return. And if you're using a tax program like Wealth Simple Tax or TurboTax, they'll have a wizard that'll take you through the process of recording your asset purchases. So at least you'll have them summarized nicely on this sheet to enter into your tax software. So we're pretty much done for the bookkeeping for the year. We have our transactions recorded in the bookkeeping sheet. We have our home office expenses recorded in the home office sheet. And we have our nice income statement showing up here. And the last thing that you might have to do is file a GST HST return. And you can see there's a tab for that as well. This is populated from that bookkeeping sheet. So we can see we had $80,000 in sales. So because it was categorized as sales, that's going to pop into that cell there. We had $4,000 of GST collected. That came from this. And it knows, the sheet knows because you've recorded it as sales and you've recorded it as GST HST. So it shows up in the GST collected row. And we also had some GST paid. And so there was GST paid on all these expenses that we would have gotten from our receipts and entered into that column. And it totals up all the ones that are expenses or asset purchases and records those as GST paid. And those are also called ITCs or input tax credits. And this is pretty much everything that you'll need to file your GST HST return for the year. It's going to ask you for sales, GST collected, GST paid, and then you're going to have a net amount to either pay, or if you paid, this isn't what you should do, but just to demonstrate, if you paid more GST than you collected, you're going to have a refund as this negative number there. One thing that you might have to do before filing your GST HST return is make an adjustment so that you're only claiming 50% of GST HST that was paid on those meals and entertainment expenses specifically. So we've got 1, we've got 2, and we've got 3, and we could just add up these total numbers and we can multiply it by 50%. We're going to get an adjustment to make sure that we only claim half of GST HST paid on meals and entertainment. There's a link in the description as well that talks about how to file your GST return, and it explains how that adjustment works for meals and entertainment. So really, all you'd have to do is something like this, copy this here, and then subtract 50% of GST paid on meals and entertainment from this number. Let's say we paid $5 in total. It would be equals 5 over 2, $2.50. So we could subtract $2.50 from 73.65. And we're going to get an updated amount of GST to claim as an info tax credit or GST paid. So this is net of that 50% adjustment. And then we have a new GST amount owing that's slightly more than it was before. So that's one way to do it. There's lots of info out there on GST returns and lots on Avalon's blog as well. So have a peek there if you're not sure where to go on GST filing. So that is about it for how to use this bookkeeping template. The next thing I'm going to dive into is a little bit of customization. So you can make some changes in how these transactions look. It can be a little bit tricky. So we're going to do this as a demonstration just to show how to change some names of transaction types and what can happen if the formulas break. So I don't recommend this, but if you're really set on changing some names, this is how you do it. If you weren't happy with some of the transaction type names, we can make some changes on there. There's just a few important things to keep in mind. So if we look at our income statement, we have a list of the expense categories, and they have to be identical to the list that's over here. The list in the transaction types is what populates the drop-down list, and then it flows into the income statement using a sum if function. So this is the key, is that if we make any changes to the transaction types, for example, if we change telephone and utilities to just utilities, we would have telephone and utilities still sitting here, but the utilities account now flows through here. So we've got utilities, and let's say we paid BC Hydro for some utilities for our office for 2022. Let's say it was $1,300. We've thought we've recorded utilities, but because our income statement says telephone and utilities, nothing is pulling through. This sum if is using this heading to pull amounts from here and not the utilities heading. It's really easy to fix. All we then need to do is go to the income statement and rename this to be exactly what it says on the bookkeeping sheet. So you can see already that $1,300 was pulled through. So step 1, change the transaction type name here. Step 2, change the transaction type name on the income statement. Step 3, do your bookkeeping using the new name from the drop-down menu. I hope you found that helpful, and now you can use our bookkeeping template in either Google Sheets or Excel. If you get stuck or if you need some guidance on things, please do reach out in the comments below. We're always happy to jump in and help if you have questions. And if you found this useful and if you like our content, please do subscribe and like the videos. It gives us motivation to keep doing these things, and we really want to help business owners. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next video.